Good afternoon. 4:06 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Josh Krausher joins us. We'll get some political analysis from him at 5 o'clock. And then Mark Paoletta is here at 5:30 as the left launches fresh, bigoted attacks on the United States Supreme Court's Justice Clarence Thomas. We'll explore with Mark Paoletta. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I was playing audio for you a short time ago of some Biden official complaining that they can't get their nominees to the Senate, but that comes as a surprise to normal people who see that the Senate just voted this past week along party lines to confirm a Biden nominee to join the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Her name is Kalpana Kodagal. She's a lawyer and now a newly confirmed EEOC commissioner, the organization who's supposed to be stopping discrimination in the workplace, except, as you might imagine, she has a career of advancing discrimination behind her. So how did she get through the Senate with a career like that? Let's explore it all with Dan Morenoff. He's the executive director at the American Civil Rights Project, and he joins us now. Hello, Dan. Good to have you with us.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Tell me about the importance of the EEOC and the career that Kalpana Kodagal has had prior to her joining it.
Sure. So the EEOC it's an agency. It was created in the 1960s. It has the function currently of enforcing Title VII and a handful of other non-discrimination employment statutes against all private employers. Mm-hmm. So, it has a wide sweeping ambit. There are powers that each individual commissioner has, but most of the most important powers they have are held by the commission as a whole. I could tell you more about the entity, but that's probably
that's okay. No. But that makes sure. The point well, which is it's supposed to be stopping discrimination in the workplace.
Correct, and it actually investigates claims when people bring them, and it's the one who actually should be litigating claims against employers, although they also allow individuals to do so if they don't think the claims should be pursued by the government itself.
Okay, and so what's Kalpana's? Yeah, what's Kalpana's career show on this issue?
Right, and she's put together, on some level, a very impressive resume of achievements for her clients. Probably the thing that she's most known for is for being the primary author of the inclusion rider stuck into the contracts of much of Hollywood, film, TV, which requires all hiring, casting decisions to be made to achieve diversity in production. That's a fascinating thing. I know the story one would tell about how it would be combating discrimination. On the other hand, to my eyes, it affirmatively enshrines racial decision-making.
Yes.
So it's rather problematic. And, that's one of her main accomplishments.
So the inclusion rider, I just want to dwell on this for a moment so I understand it. So this would be like an actor only signing on to a film so long as the film, as stipulated in the contract, so long as the film commits to racial prejudice in hiring. You have to hire certain numbers of people of various colors in order to get me on this movie.
I think that's basically right. And it's not just actors. It's as I understand it, at least, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm an entertainment law specialist. Uh-huh. I understand that it's also for, producers, all the people involved in the entire process.
I see. And so that they'll stipulate, I'll only join this project if you do this kind of racial hiring.
And again, I'm inferring this. I think also that, your hiring of me is subject to achieving these ends, such that, if diversity requires the production company to replace you with someone of a different race, you can't complain because that's what you contracted for.
Right. But right now it's against federal law, I thought, to say create a program that's designed to only give one race an advantage. These things constantly, every so often you see, say, some corporation will offer like a fellowship. It's just specifically for Black Americans. And then all of a sudden they'll face a lawsuit and they're like, well, you can't do that. You can't only hire a Black person for this job.
Right. I mean, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is the most prominent employment law, which says you cannot make employment decisions based on race, ethnicity, or I guess technically it's race, national origin, religion, sex, and this is pretty flagrantly violating it. I mean, that's how I would read it.
The inclusion rider, the inclusion rider, you say, is flagrantly violating federal law.
I think I find it difficult not to conclude that every decision being made to comply with the inclusion rider is being made in violation of federal law. I mean, I'll tell you, there are exceptions to that general exception the courts have recognized since the Weber decision decades ago. The courts have allowed racially conscious decisions to be made when you're talking about an employer trying to fix a racial imbalance in a part of its workforce that was traditionally segregated, to solve the results of its own recent past history of intentional discrimination, as long as the program is temporary and not intended to maintain a racial balance going forward. I think it's very hard to argue how Hollywood decisions could be shoehorned into that exception.
Yes. Well, I have to imagine that there are like visual categories, though, which would allow for it. So, like, if you were looking for a model of a certain stature and skin color, would that be illegal to do?
I mean, in general terms, you could not make your hiring decision on that basis. To be perfectly honest, I don't know enough about arts law to tell you whether there is a carve out there specifically for such a thing. But I don't believe there is, and I would be surprised if that were the case.
All right, so as you point out, these are jobs that don't involve necessarily even appearing on camera that we're talking about, these inclusion riders.
That's right.
And so she's advanced racial prejudice for her whole career. How did she make it through the Senate confirmation process? Was this just a battle that the Democrats prevailed in, and that's it?
Well, the vote was 49-47 because a number of senators were absent. So even though there was one Democrat who voted no, she was confirmed.
Yeah.
I have not been able to track down which senators missed the vote. It's a pretty important post, and it's really disappointing that people were not there. But I don't know why they weren't, and maybe there's some justification for it. It's very disappointing.
Yes.
that there are in fact senators who were opposed to her confirmation who just weren't there and therefore didn't vote no.
Well, this also now fully equips the left with control of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. What will the downstream effects of that be?
Well, it means that before the EEOC brings litigation, that litigation has to be approved by the commissioners themselves. So when there was a 3-2, I'll refer to it as conservative majority, they were not choosing to bring they were choosing to bring different kinds of suits than this new majority is going to choose to bring. And in fact, for the last few months, there had been a 2-2 split because someone's term of office had ended. And unless you had a majority voting in favor of bringing litigation, it couldn't be brought. So, this is what's been accomplished by the confirmation, is that there is now a 3-2 split.
Yeah. I also see in the Daily Caller's coverage here of this, they reference that Kodagal, the new commissioner on the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, also played a prominent role in a case involving having the insurance company Aetna expand its coverage to include breast augmentations as a part of transgender sex change surgeries, with the firm placing it under her, quote, recent successes on the law firm's website. So she's also been a big proponent of this kind of cosmetic genital mutilation as well.
She seemingly has laid some markers as to where she comes out on the continued effort of the administration to reinterpret our statutes on sex discrimination to actually be about sexuality and gender. And yeah, I would expect that that will probably pan out in a number of areas where there has not to date been a majority of the EEOC that agrees with her, but presumptively there now is.
So you expect that things are about to become kind of chaotic with the EEOC and American businesses?
I would expect that the EEOC is about to start issuing a whole lot of guidance, which will be instructing American businesses what they must do in ways that I don't actually think the statutes it's applying can be interpreted to read. And, you know, it's not just me. I'll give you one example, and I know we're probably short on time. There was a guidance that came out shortly after there was a guidance on Bostock-related workplace issues, specifically dealing with single-sex bathrooms at employers.
Yeah.
The guidance was put out by the chairman of the EEOC, by Chairman Burroughs. And it was put out just under the chairman's authority because the majority of the EEOC did not agree with the guidance she was offering as to what Title VII meant in this context. That was litigated. A district court in Texas ruled the guidance document that Chairman Burroughs had issued to be void and in violation of law. I think it's safe to assume that you're going to see something very similar come back now with an actual vote and lots of other parallel situations. One I'll flag for you. They're likely to require employers of sufficient size to now report not just the race and sex of their employees at different levels, but also the gender and sexuality of their employees. That's a really interesting, likely imposition in, among other reasons, because, you know, if we can jump all the way back to the Lawrence decision in which Justice Kennedy wrote for a majority invalidating state sodomy laws, his reasoning was that people were not free if they could not make decisions of how to define their own sexuality without the compulsion of the state. But if your employer is required to report your sexuality to the government, that means you're required by the state to report your sexuality to your employer.
Yes.
And it's really hard for me to imagine how that could be constitutional, even under Justice Kennedy's reading. So, you know, these will be the kinds of things that one should be looking for going forward.
Well, I'm glad you're keeping an eye on it. Dan Morenoff over at the American Civil Rights Project. Thank you for standing up for civil rights, truly. And good to chat with you today. Thank you, Dan. The left, obsessed with human sacrifice. What is it about these people? John Kirby, they say he's an admiral. He was at the White House press briefing today, and he ended his remarks to the press for the adult portion of the briefing by talking about how it's really, really important that we abort more babies, that the United States military, if it's going to be lethal, it needs to start with small children. That's the key. So here's John Kirby today, and apparently in this handoff, Corinne is very excited that he said all this, and she comes up and the town hall describes her as giving his arm a little thank you squeeze after he spends a couple minutes attempting to explain why abortion is essential to military readiness. Here is John Kirby in a moment that would haunt a decent man for the rest of his life.
We want to keep the people that we get, and we want to make sure that they can continue to serve. So it can have an extremely significant impact on our recruiting and our retention. Not to mention, it's just the right darn thing to do for people that raise their hand and agree to serve in the military.
Yeah, if we don't help them kill their babies, what kind of country are we? Can you believe this guy? It's the right darn thing to do. The right thing to do. That's a throwback to the Obama era. That was an Obama-ism. Barack Obama would never explain himself. He would just justify everything with, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Really, Admiral, it's the right darn thing to do?
Not to mention, it's just the right darn thing to do for people that raise their hand and agree to serve in the military.
Thank you, Admiral.
Okay, Raquel. Thank you so much, Carmen. Hi, John. John, last week, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez asked...
Yeah, so what you can't hear is just as Corinne reaches over and she squeezes his arm. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. It was so important to me as a mother. Well, I'm not really a mother. I'm a lesbian. But still, I'm so thankful to you that you would stand up for the death of the unborn. That's insane. And that's what's coming out of the White House. And then they moralize to you. They sit on their high horse and they say, if you're not for that, you're the indecent person. So Tommy Tuberville, I told you earlier in the program, Tuberville right now is standing up in the face of this ghoulishness, going, nope, no more taxpayer money. In fact, we have laws against this already. Why are you doing this? No more taxpayer money used to fund and assist aborting these babies. Stop it. The United States military's lethality is not for babies. It's for our enemies. That's the game. It's not the game. It's the whole point. It's the whole point. Here's John Kirby today, just defending the worst possible policies. Not good. Not bueno. Coming up, we're going to talk to Josh Krausher about the state of the 2024 primaries and one Democrat congresswoman's unbridled attacks on Israel this past weekend. All ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Well, good afternoon to you. 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Josh Krausher will be with us at 5 o'clock. We'll talk about the 2024 primaries. And at 5:30, Mark Paoletta is here as we talk about the left's bigoted attacks, including on Justice Clarence Thomas, yet again this weekend. They can't help themselves. The more decent it is, the more they want to destroy it. And you can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. You notice the Washington Post in the past week is going for a world record on stupidity? I mean, they have had some of the dumbest possible pieces, all packed into just a few short issues. And one of them that caught a bunch of attention this weekend was the decision to go after a song called Fast Car. Do you remember Fast Car? Tracy Chapman, Fast Car, from 1988. It was one of the biggest hits in the whole country when it came out. Wildly successful. And that's important to this story because of the way the Washington Post is handling it right now. Let me first remind you of what, in case you don't know, what the song sounds like. You'll recognize it instantly if you weren't sure before. Tracy Chapman puts out this song, and it just dominated. It was one of the biggest hits on the planet. You couldn't escape it. It was everywhere. She was playing to sold-out crowds in Wembley Stadium. It was amazing. It was great success for a great song, the kind of success that any artist is going to look for in their life. They could only dream of, and she achieved it. So recently, country star Luke Combs decided that he would do a cover of that song, Fast Car, and it has been an enormous hit, so much so that it reached #1 last week on the Billboard Country Airplay chart. Now, I wasn't even aware of this until the Washington Post covered it. I didn't know that Luke Combs had recorded. I'm not a big country music guy. I listen to country when it's on. I listen, but I'm not searching it out. I like it a lot. But here's Luke Combs playing Fast Car, and he does a fantastic job. It's an incredible version. You can see why it's #1 on the country charts. Doesn't change any of the lyrics to the song. Sometimes when you do a gender switch, they'll change the lyric to be like, refer to myself and her, and that. He didn't do any of that. He refers to him as a sales girl or something later. There's a lyric later in the song where he refers to himself yet again as a girl because all he's doing is Tracy Chapman's lyrics. She wrote the song, and he's covering it, and he's covering it purely. Well, this is a big controversy at the Washington Post. Guess why? Guess why it's a problem? Because, see if you can follow the lefty logic here. You may already know the answer. She is, and I didn't know that she was, they say queer. She is a black queer woman. That's how they describe her. And he is a white straight male. So I guess he's not allowed to perform her song. even though she's being financially enriched by his decision to do that, even though last week when he hit #1 on the charts, making her the first black woman to ever have a solo country song on #1 on the charts because she wrote the song. And she was tweeting, she was expressing on social media how wonderful this is, how exciting, all these years later. And so the Washington Post decided, you know who's the victim in this story, as if there is a victim in this story, is her. She is the victim. They write, singers know that virtually any audience will hear the opening notes and go crazy. So it has become a go-to cover song since its 1988 release on Chapman's self-titled debut folk album. But in the past few months, one particular cover has struck a chord that no one saw coming. In March, country music star Luke Combs, 33, released a new album, Getting Old, that included Fast Car, a longtime favorite that he covered during live shows for years. But when the track hit streaming services, it took on a life of its own, racking up enormous numbers and going viral on TikTok. Country radio stations started playing it, and the song was suddenly outpacing Combs' actual single, Love You Anyway. Combs and his team were stunned by the response. His label eventually started promoting Fast Car to country radio as well. Last week, it reached #1 on the Billboard Country Airplay chart. It was at #3 on the all-genre Hot 100 chart after peaking at #2. To quite a few people, this is cause for yet another celebration in Combs' whirlwind journey as the genre's reigning megastar with 16 consecutive #1 hits. But, the Washington Post writes, it has also prompted a wave of complicated feelings among some listeners and in the Nashville music community. Although many are thrilled to see Fast Car back in the spotlight and a new generation discovering Chapman's work, it's clouded by the fact that as a black queer woman, Chapman, 59, would have almost zero chance of that achievement herself in country music. What? What are they? First of all, it wasn't written as a country song to begin with. You heard earlier in the piece, it was considered in the folk category of music. So the claim is that Chapman wouldn't have been able to do this on her own because she's a black queer woman. She's a megastar because of that song. That was a massive hit. And she's still making bank on it to this very day. The fact that Luke Combs was able to put it out with her writing credit on it means that she's going to make a lot more money. It's #1 in the country. On the country music charts, #2 for the Hot 100 charts. That's a huge deal for a writer. This is why, one of the ways, Taylor Swift has become so filthy rich, in addition to her like crazy high ticket prices for her concerts, she is a singer-songwriter. She gets the writing royalties on the songs she writes. Ed Sheeran is a singer-songwriter. Not only are they incredible talents, they get the money from writing the song, which is massive. So she's going to make some coin off of this. She is not aggrieved. There's not a single word in this entire Washington Post piece that quotes her or anybody near her that says that she's somehow upset that Luke Combs covered her music. In fact, she was celebrating it this past week. Additionally, I see that there are others who are celebrating this. Darius Rucker, who you may know from a lot of things, but from Hootie and the Blowfish, for one, but also from his cover of Wagon Wheel. His Wagon Wheel cover, which was originally from Old Crow Medicine Show. His cover, Wagon Wheel, that's when you think of Darius Rucker, I think a lot of people think of Wagon Wheel now. And it's just been a massive hit for him. He's a black man who covered a country song and became one of the biggest hits in country music doing that very thing. So what are we supposed to learn from this? Why isn't Darius Rucker even mentioned in this piece? Darius Rucker says that the Luke Combs cover is fantastic. He said, quote, "What a great cover. When I heard it, I was like, this song's a smash," he said. That's such a great song. And he took it and he made it his own. And when you do it like that, that's going #1 fast, he said. There's a lot of people who didn't know that song until he did it. And that's what's great about those songs, he says. You bring a great song to a bunch of new people. So that's great. Isn't that great? It's a wholesome story. But so essentially inside of this entire saga is this left-wing desire to tear down, to destroy, to sow division. And rather than celebrate the reemergence of this song as a #1 hit in the country, they want to take this moment to attack the guy who dared do it and also pay Tracy Chapman an immense amount of money for the privilege. They want to attack him for it. That's crazy. That's just fully crazy. And it's on display this week in the Washington Post. I mean, listen to this thing. It's just, his body's too old for working. His body's too young to look like this. It's just, anyway, great line. Kudos to Tracy Chapman. I'm glad she has, as far as I can tell, she hasn't said anything publicly to support any of this nonsense. Good for her. She shouldn't. I mean, she's doing great on the basis of this and in her own career. Luke Combs, fantastic talent. That guy's got a great tone. I listened to that this weekend, and all of a sudden I was like, I spilled down a rabbit hole of other Luke Combs music. I'm like, I got to find out what else this guy's put together. So, you know, if something good comes of all of this, it's that. You switched on to some talented people. And then one last thing I want to point out about this Washington Post piece. They clearly have no idea what they're talking about. The writer of this piece has like no frame of reference. Her name's Emily Yarr. How old is she? She can't be that old. She's got to be a young girl. But here she is, like, you know, sowing racial division over this nonsense. I got to be honest with you. I mean, I've heard, I don't know a great deal about Tracy Chapman. You know, I looked her up and I found out more about her and I found out the immense success that she's had. But honestly, she's got such a deep voice. I didn't even really realize at the outset it was a female singer. Am I alone in this? If you listen to the beginning of that song, I actually, for years, I've just heard it on the radio play. And to me, it always sounded like, hey, it's just some guy, whatever. Right, so that was a good one. I really, I enjoyed the stupidity of that story. What else is the Washington Post doing? Oh, they spent the weekend attacking a North Korean defector for overstating how bad North Korea and communism are. They did a deep dive in to a woman by the name of Yeonmi Park, and they say that her tales don't add up. So they agree that she's actually a North Korean defector. She's a woman who was able to get out of North Korea. You don't see that every day. And they go on to say that, quote, on Twitter they posted, conservative audiences are enthralled by Yeonmi Park's tales of communist dictatorship and her claim that liberals are steering America onto the same path. But critics say her accounts of life in the brutal regime don't add up. And so then what they do is they run through a litany of things that she claimed that she's witnessed, and then they turn to, quote, experts on North Korea, and they say, does that sound right to you? And then they're like, that doesn't sound right to me. You know, it's like she said she saw an execution in a stadium, and then they claimed, oh, there were no executions in stadiums. And honestly, it's pretty impossible, actually, to know what the truth is because it's North Korea. It's kind of the Hermit Kingdom is kind of closed off from everything, including getting information in and out. But this is a woman there's nobody who's disputing she's actually from North Korea. She actually escaped it, and she actually has criticisms of communism. And so the Washington Post deploys its efforts into hurting her, trying to say that she's not legitimate and she's not credible and she shouldn't be trusted. Why? Because she's elaborating on the horrors of communism? Oh, she's overstating the case? Don't give communism such a bad rap? What's the point of all of this? So they wrote a big piece about how, it just, quote, doesn't add up. They go through her whole life. They dug through everything. How she started off as she was on reality TV. She was on a South Korean reality television show where she was. It was about families that were separated by the Korean War, and it drew on her experience from her time in North Korea. And they say over time some of her stories have changed about what she said when she was younger versus what she says now, and that's fine. But you got to believe in the many thousands of words that they put out on this. It was designed to be fundamentally a sympathetic defense of communism. Whoa! Don't you say we're headed down this path? Don't you use your experience from North Korea to warn us about what's happening in our country? Settle down, lady. Settle down. Everything's going to be great here. They got communism wrong. Nobody's quite done it right yet. But here in the United States, it's going to be different. It's going to be different this time. Sure it is. So anyways, that's what the Washington Post is up to this week.
Good afternoon. Yeah, it's amazing because Tracy Chapman apparently has made money from, at minimum, 4 other people doing a cover of this song. Christian Kane, who, do you ever watch Leverage? He was the hitter, Elliot Spencer. Mm-hmm. He did a cover of that on his Welcome to My House album that was released, I believe it was 2015. So, and he did a cover of it, sometime before that.
Yeah.
And put that on his album.
This is, here it is. Let me play it. This is.
Yeah. And, and Tracy Chapman, she's making buku bucks.
Yes.
When you think about it. Because how many people have re-downloaded her version? And plus, Luke Combs and, I bought the Christian Kane album, and there's a lot of Caniacs out there that have that album. That's what people who like Christian Kane call themselves as Caniacs.
I believe it.
So, so she's making, good money.
So you're saying she's not the victim of this story, Mary?
No.
No.
The
Okay,
only
good.
victim here are the people who read the Washington Post article.
Yeah, and fell for it. Yeah. Yeah, I read it and I got something good out of it. I had a deep dive into a fun song from a bunch of different artists, and with no small thanks to you too, Mary, for the Christian Kane version. Thank you. All right, thanks, Mary, for that. Coming up, I've got Josh Krauscher joining me just ahead. We'll talk about the 2024 primary field. Things are definitely shaking up.